Yeah, good to go.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Therese Brown with the Association of Catholic Publishers. I am more than happy to welcome one of our associate members, Metacomet and James, uh, to the platform to give us a deep dive into some work that they do on royalty automation and hopefully to answer any questions that you have. For those of you who are going to be with us next week at the membership meeting, please take advantage of that opportunity to interact with them on site. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to talk with you in greater depth on your specific concerns and issues at that time. Just a couple of logistics. I am here to keep time and to help facilitate discussions. So if you have a question or a comment and that you'd like to raise, please feel free to put that in the chat or the Q&A. I will monitor that and we will make sure that our wonderful experts here get to address those. And then if we get close to time, then I will let y'all know that. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Metacomet and their expertise. So, James, it's all yours. I'm also going to give you the sharing opportunity so you can share your screen instead of mine. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right, you good to go?
You are
Okay.
good.
All right, I think I'm good to go. All right. You can see my screen, I hope.
Yes, we can. You are in good shape.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for showing up. Thanks for giving us the time to present to you. So what I'm going to present is actually rights and royalty processing and specific for Catholic publishers. I have with me Aiden. It's not a second me. Aiden's using my login or the link from my teams, and that's why his name hasn't come up there. This is Aiden Fleming, and he's going to actually be doing the brief demonstration of the actual platform itself. But before we get into that, I'll let you know what we're going to cover in the next 60 minutes. I don't think it's going to take 60 minutes, but I want you to feel free to also ask questions throughout, but I do have time at the end for a Q&A. But if something's pressing, I think you can put it in the chat, and I think Teresa will, she can maybe perhaps monitor that and see what questions might come up. So what we're going to talk about today is the rights foundation. So the rights are integral to royalties because rights are the revenue, and the more rights you sell, the more royalties you need to actually process and get paid to your authors. We're going to look at sacred and liturgical permissions. These are things that are specific to Catholic publishing. And the royalty processing, this is where we're going to do kind of a deep dive on that, what it means, the rights that you've got, and the sort of the some of the rules that you need to look out for as a Catholic publisher that are specific to Catholic publishing, that just generic trade publishing doesn't really have to worry about. There's going to be a bit on contract riders that can protect you. This is scripture and doctrinal alignment language. And then Aiden's going to walk us through a live demo, maybe just 20 minutes, a high level overview of the system from rights, how it marries to royalties and how those royalties get processed. And then lastly, I'm going to leave you with an action plan and some takeaways and give you some time for a Q&A. So why royalty processing deserves a webinar all of its own. Um, I am James Whitaker. I'm the Vice President of Business Development. With me is Aidan Fleming. He's part of our customer success team. And together we represent Metacomet here. And Metacomet has been in the business of rights and royalties processing for about 26 years. We've been specific to the publishing industry. Metacomet was actually born out of a literary agency that realized it needed a system, a tool, an automated tool so that they could deliver accurate accurate royalty payments on time and with a professional statement. So, royalties are where rights become revenue. So every single license you grant, every NABR quotation, every translation, audio download, it should be traceable from contract to payment. Um, for Catholic publishers, the stakes are a little higher because you've got scripture and liturgical permissions. They're layered through the USCCB, ICEL, and the Vatican. Many titles mix copyrighted and ecclesiastically approved content. Diocesan and parish and academic channels have non-standard royalty terms. And manual royalty spreadsheets really do break the moment subrights deal starts to close because it increases the complexity and it increases your risk of human error in all of that complexity that needs to be collated. So we're going to start with the rights foundation because before we talk royalties, it's important that we talk rights. So what are your primary versus your subsidiary rights? Primary rights, these are the ones you retain and the ones that you exercise. You have print. This is hardcover, trade, paper, mass market, ebook, digital download, audio, spoken word editions, large print Catholic devotionals, parish and diocesan bulk editions, and educational and catechetical editions. I've been working on that one and I knew I'd still screw it up. And then you get your subsidiary rights. These are the rights that you license to others. Foreign language translation. It can be any language, but Spanish, Italian, French, Portuguese, Korean is big. Film, TV, and streaming adaptation, serialization, magazine excerpts, liturgical and worship aid licensing, curriculum.
I found this on.
Oops, Siri's listening to me. Curriculum, study guides, and RCIA materials, and apps, podcasts, and digital ministry use. So subsidiary rights usually are the difference between what has a book break even and one that becomes really, really profitable. And so I think it's important that you focus on the subsidiary rights because some of them are really easy to achieve, but they become overlooked because there's just so much else to do. So this is what the rights revenue matrix does look like for Catholic publishers. And up here, I've got this little legend, and I'm sure this little legend up here is much more for me than you. But there are a lot of acronyms getting thrown around, and it was important for me to sort of understand exactly what these all meant. So these are the rights channels. So in translation, the primary channels, Spanish, Italian, Polish, Korean, as I suggested. The deal structure for these is usually an advance plus a royalty. You'll see there's a very high potential here. Strong demand in the Latin and African markets. These translations are not hard, really not hard to sell. You just need to get out there, find the right publishers that make sense given your publishing program, and just strike these deals for translation rights. These are some of the easiest ones to do. And strangely enough, it's often overlooked. Audio. So the primary channels, Audible, Hallow, Word on Fire. This is typically a revenue share or a flat fee. Again, an easy one to sell, and it's also something that surprisingly is overlooked a lot. Film and TV. This is where the big money is, but it's also incredibly rare. But this is the highest potential for revenue, and that's why you see there it's got the gold stars to it. And the deal structures here are usually an option or a step. And the option is when you agree to sell the rights for a production of a work. And the option is it provides a period of time, be it a year, 2 years, for that option period to become the production itself. In the meantime, you get a percentage of what that overall purchase would be. And should the production not come to fruition, you get to keep that percentage and the rights revert back to you. If it does obviously go to production, then you get paid. The step approach is a little different. It's one that It's basically agreed the price, but the steps are the first manuscript, the beginning of production, and then release. Curriculum. Diocese, Catholic schools, RCIA, this is usually an advance and a royalty, very much like translation. There's less potential in it because it's not as high a revenue generator, but it is recurring revenue, which should be recognized because recurring revenue is really important. Liturgical use, parishes, missalettes, worship aids. This is a per use license. Again, not as high revenue, but it is out there. And ICEL and USCCB are the layered approval uh, processes that you must go through before these will get done. Merchandise. Holy Heroes, Aquinas, more, you can think of them. This is strict royalty percentage against the retail price. And lastly, it's accessible. The primary channels look like the Xavier Society, the NLS. These are often donated because this is sort of mission critical to the point of your Catholic publishing. So the rules that apply only to Catholic publishers, this is sacred and liturgical permissions. So the Catholic scripture, there and translations and permission thresholds. And again, here another legend, largely here from me because there's so many acronyms here, but there is a lot to look at. So the core problem here is that the Catholic Bible translations are copyrighted. They're not public domain. So each rights body permits a limited gratis quotation. And once you cross that threshold, a paid license will be required. Some of the triggers can be a verse count, percentage of the book, a format, the commercial use for that work. And for the New American Bible, you get up to 5,000 verses or 50% of the work. And this is what's gratis. And as soon as you cross that line, you need to get a license for that. For the Revised Standard Version, that's a limited gratis. You have to see the Ignatius terms, so you need to go to the Ignatius Press. The new Revised Standard Version and the updated, it's 500 verses or under 50%. You have to go to the NCC or the Westminster John Knox for that. Jerusalem or the New Jerusalem Bible, it's limited. You have to request this in advance, and you have two places to go, and that's either Dartmouth or Longman and Todd. The Douay-Rheims and the Latin Vulgate Clementine, these are both public domain. There's no license needed. You can use as much as you wish. And then you've got the Nova Vulgata. This is the Vatican copyright, which is applied here. And as a result, you need to go to Libreria Editrice Vaticana. So in liturgical text, the ICEL, the USCCB, and the Holy See, these are the permission layers that exist only for Catholic publishers. So the ICEL, this is the International Commission on English in the Liturgy, and it holds rights to the English translation of the Roman Missal, the Liturgy of the Hours, and most ritual books. A license is required for any reproduction in books, apps, or worship aids. So here is where it's very important that you negotiate the territory and the format up front. Next, you got the USCCB. They hold rights to the New American Bible, the Catechism USA edition, and many ritual adaptations for the states. Royalty terms vary by the edition use. Academic, devotional, and parish editions all price very differently. And one thing that you must note that there will be a statement of faith alignment expected for you to sign as well. And Libreria Editrice Vaticana, this holds the copyright on all papal documents. The official catechism, the Code of Canon Law, and many magisterial texts. This is for use in commercial books, even short quotations of long encyclicals. It all requires direct Lev permission and a fee. And from what I understand, getting this, you're going to look at up to 3 months for a response. Imprimatur or nihil obstat. This is something that you should really build into the production of your books. So this is pre-production. So this is about ecclesiastical approval as a contract milestone. So it has to be free of doctrinal or moral error, and it should also be a royalty trigger in your system. What I mean by that, there's steps to this. There's four steps. You got the manuscript review. The author and the publisher submits to the local ordinary's office for review of doctrine and morals. The nihil obstat is the censor deputatus certifies the work is free of doctrinal or moral error. And then the imprimatur is granted. The bishop grants formal permission to print. This is required for catechisms, missals, and devotionals. And then this should be used as a pre-press gate. So essentially, once this permission is granted, and that once you get to it being permission granted, this is where you can make sure that you've taken care of all of these processes first, so that you don't find yourself in a position post-press where you can put yourself at risk to have uh, you know broken the copyright. So, and the royalty processing, this is where we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into subrights, splits, reserves, and how this all works, and how Catholic royalty accounting may be a little bit different than trade. So the royalty life cycle, it looks like this. You've got 6 checkpoints, and in with this, you mitigate 3 risks. You mitigate your operational risk. How do you do this? Through automation. Uh, when you're doing everything manually, there's a lot of cutting and pasting. There's a lot of collation of documents and information, and that's always open to human error. That human error then leads to the potential for financial risk. The financial risk could be either overpaying or underpaying an author or an organization, or even just being in a position where you're not getting your advances for the rights that you've sold. And ultimately, this can lead to authors and royalty recipients that are not really feeling like they're treated properly. And as a result, you've got yourself a reputational risk. So the further you can automate away from a spreadsheet situation, you start to remove all of these risks. So what does this look like? You've got the contract, which is signed. So the rights are then defined and the royalty rates are completely set. From there, sales and licensing begins. The revenue is starting to get generated by SKU and by channel. So here you've got the advance, and that advance needs to be earned out. You need a system also that is seeing that that advance is being earned out and is accruing appropriately for that. Once the advance is earned out, you now have a royalty calculation, which is a rate times the revenue by format and by tier. From there, you can look at your statements. You can issue the statements once you know they're right. And then finally, your authors get paid. So the types of royalties that work here, we've got net receipt royalties. So this is a percentage of what the publisher actually receives. You've got a list price royalty as well, which is a percentage of the cover price. And then you've got subright splits. This is translation, audio, film. Receipts for these are split between the publisher and the author, and what you need to do is negotiate the split and the agent commission, and this needs to be really explicit in every contract. Diocesan and bulk pricing. This is parish bulk orders and Catholic school orders and adoptions. They often discount really steeply, so that you need to define a royalty floor so that your authors aren't paying for the discount. So what's different in royalty reporting for Catholic publishers? There are 6 things that you really have to do that a generic publisher doesn't. This is one of the most interesting things about building the webinar, is to find out that there are all these specific rules for Catholic publishers that the trade doesn't need to worry about. So some of the 6 things that you really should keep an eye out when you're doing your royalty reporting. The first is you need to track verse counts by format. Print, ebook, audio, they each has its own NABRE and RSV threshold. The royalty system has to track them independently, or you'll under license one channel. And then you need to audit all the derivative SKUs that come out of that. So you might have a print book, but the derivatives that say, be it the study guides, the RCIA kits, the video courses, based on a single title, are all going to carry different permissions of their own, and as such, their own royalties. They're not like free riders to the original agreement. Diocesan and parish reserves. So Catholic retail does have returns exposure, meaning parishes overstock from time to time. So in this case, you need a system whereby you can really reserve a percentage of you can define a reserve percentage for those returns so that you're not putting yourself in a position to overpay a royalty. Typically, the reserves are 25% for over about 2 periods. And then you have to account for liturgical use royalties. ISEL and OCP style remittances flow back to rights. They can whatever cadence, and you need to build them into your statement run. And don't. It's hard if you do this kind of thing on a separate spreadsheet. This again leads to this operational inefficiency, which could lead to errors. Subagent transparency. So this is foreign rights deals via an agent. They must show the gross receipt, the agent commission, and the net to the author. This should be required contractually, and it should be reported cleanly. So typically, semi-annual is the norm. I do see some that do it quarterly, even monthly, but semi-annual is the norm. And typically, they run January to June, paid in August, July to December, paid in February. And what you should really do is push for format and territory breakdowns, not just the total. And this should be on every statement that you produce. And it should be known that this is precisely what Metacomet was built for in these workflows. We are purpose-built for publishers like ACP members. And Aidan's going to show you this live in a couple of minutes. So there are a few places where Catholic publishers could find themselves at risk. So there's 5 royalty hotspots in virtually every audit. One would be untracked subrights. An audio or a translation deal closes, nothing flows back to the author statements for about 12 months. And you have to make sure that advances have been accrued for and have actually been received for those audio sales or for those translation sales. It is actually shocking to me how often we find that because there's so many deals done and through manual effort alone, without a system to actually trigger and tell you you have not received your advance and this advance should be done come in a week, or this advance should have been paid last week, these advances can go missing. Missed scripture licenses, app or ebook edition would exceed the NABRE gratis. So if you've gone over the 5,000 limit or the 50% of the book, without an incremental license that's being paid because you went over that gratis period, you could find yourself in a big payback liability position. The wrong base for net receipts. Catholic schools discounts applied below the royalty floor. Slowly, the author is quietly underpaid on every cycle, and this could end up leading to reputational risk. But also, your authors are your lifeblood, and you want to make sure they're happy that they're getting accurate statements, they're getting them on time, and they're getting them in a professional statement. Overheld reserve. So 25% never gets 25% reserve maybe never gets released. Again, because of that, trust erodes, authors consider leaving for a competing press. So what you need is a system that is going to accrue for that 25% reserve and is going to do it for you automated in an automated fashion, pardon me, because doing this on a spreadsheet means you're also putting in you're putting in guides into your calendar to look at things and certain dates, and it just gets very, very complicated very, very quickly. And statement opacity. Pardon me. If you have an annual PDF instead of an online portal, It's harder for authors to reconcile where their statements exist, and as a result, it's also a bit harder for the finance to defend themselves. With an automated system, that authors can come in and see their statements, know exactly what the history is, understand exactly where the royalties were earned, where the rights were sold that also produced more earnings. They feel completely transparent in the system, and as a result, you can always defend your position. Typically, within Metacomet anyways, we have a completely audited stream. So if there is still a discrepancy that is registered, we can go back into the system and very simply show this is what sold, this is what where the royalties were earned, and as a result, you can really defend yourself properly. So another thing I want to talk about is a language that protects you. So there are two riders that every ACP member should really standardize within your contracts. So rider number one is the scripture and liturgical permissions. This covers, what it covers. This lists every Bible translation, liturgical source, and magisterial text used within the work. So the thresholds, this caps usage at gratis limits per source. And it triggers when that licensing has exceeded the gratis limit. This is across print, ebook, audio, video, and apps. So why is this important? This is important because of who pays. By default, the publisher bears the cost, but you can negotiate whether over threshold licensing is actually recouped against royalties. You might have an author that is really insistent that you go above a gratis limit, and if in doing so, you as the publisher can have the option of saying, okay, this is important enough. Uh, we will we will bear the cost, or you can negotiate with the author. We can publish as much as you want, but whatever that license is over and above the gratis amount is then going to come back out of your royalties as they're earned. So new translations added post-contract. This is what you need to watch out for because um, uh, once these translations happen, sometimes you find yourself, if you haven't done an audit of it, you cross a gratis threshold. So this is something to be quite mindful of. And then you've got doctrinal and magisterium alignment. So this ensures the work aligns with the publisher and pardon me, and the relevant catechism teaching. This is scope to the work and not to the author's personal life. So and in the review process, the publisher needs to flag passages of a concern within 10 business days, and then the author has the opportunity to revise that and make it fit within the moral doctrine. So sometimes this is easy to resolve, but if it's not, then it might go to mediation. So one of the critical carve-outs here is that no action on the author is allowed based on lawful religious expression that's unrelated to the work. So this protects the author's pastoral voice. And why this matters? It protects the brand identity integrity without overreaching. It keeps the morals dispute out of royalty terminations. So standardizing both riders in your master template is really important. Then you can basically version control them, but don't try and reinvent the language for every single author. So from here, I think I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Aidan, and he's going to walk you through the system, what a royalty system, a rights and royalty system looks like. This is going to be pretty high level, 15, 20 minutes, but hopefully you'll get a taste for exactly what the system looks like, and moreover, you'll get to see just how simple it is to use. All right,
All right.
hand to you.
Try and take over the screen share here. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. So
Yes.
I'm going to start off with rights. We're actually going to be looking at 4 different tools today, but rights will take up roughly 40%, and then one of the other ones is kind of the main core one. So starting with rights, the way that we've laid this out is kind of following that life cycle or timeline that James laid out, where it all begins with actually acquiring and signing the contract, acquiring some title, some work. So the way that we set that up in the system is by creating a new, we call them projects. All that we need for that is potentially some ID, what it's called, publication date, and just general who are the licensors. That's not necessary, but it is helpful information that we can associate with the title. Once the title is created, we can actually come in here and define what rights were given for this particular title. So we can decide whether it's for the globe, all languages, all formats, or if it's more particular, we can create specific bundles. So maybe it's only for audio, and maybe it's only for English or Spanish. This would be the way that we can kind of manage particular groups of rights. And then based on that, we can view in our map here and see what's actually still available for licensing or what's already been licensed and is no longer available, but is an actual right that you have acquired. The next step is to actually load in or configure all of the contacts. So this would be licensors, this would be licensees, and this would also be any sort of agent that's working with either the licensor, licensee, or potentially both in rare cases. So we need to know about everyone in here. And really, it's just whatever information you can give us, what type of role they are, what their name is, email, phone, things like that. And then once we have all that contact information, we can then go over to our agreements here and actually create that structure of we have this title with these rights available, and it's due to this particular licensee, and they're in agreement to own these particular rights. So the way that looks is we'll create a new agreement. We would select who it's for. We'll just pick Blue Ridge. We can decide based on down here how our subrights calculations are classified. So based on receipts due to this title, how do we then turn around and create subrights to load into Royalty Tracker? I'll talk a bit more about that once we get there. We're able to then associate which title or titles potentially, if they're under agreement with multiple different titles, it's a series or some multiple editions of a title, they're all bundled into one. We're able to configure that as well. We'll need to decide which rights of the ones that are available for that title are actually included in this agreement, whether they're exclusive or not, general contract terms for royalties, basic contract information, as well as just some general details around their statements and sort of payment cadence. Lastly, we have a lot of different date fields here, just so you can track all the different sort of milestones and big events that occur during that contract or agreement, and just make sure that you're tracking exactly when it starts, when it ends or expires, any upcoming dates, and it's all accessible here. That is pretty much that whole sort of first setup phase. So now that we have the agreement, then we can actually start doing reports on it. So we can see based on a particular language, which rights are currently available. We can see based on advances that have been applied to particular titles or projects, what those are at, if there's any sort of advances that are unrecouped yet. So we can see based on what's been paid, the original total advance amount and the current tracked paid amount, or sorry, unpaid amount. A few other reports here just for kind of narrowing down on and finding particular agreements that maybe you want to produce a list of available rights that you have to take to a trade show of some kind. Maybe you want to track down some advances that you're still waiting to actually get payment on. So there's a lot of different reports here just for helping you identify particular sets of rights or agreements that you need to look at and potentially do some work for. Other section here is receipts. So this is where we'll actually be able to know that you have received some payment for the rights that you've acquired and then licensed out. So these will be entered in, and this would, depending on how we've configured it, potentially generate sales that we can then turn around and create royalties off of to pay to authors. Last couple things I'll mention is just everything in here as far as which regions are available, the languages, all the different types and coding. It's all flexible. So you'll be able to go in, define default bundles. You'll be able to define exactly what formats you're selling or have available for rights, which regions. So it's all very, very flexible. And same with settings. If you wanted to customize the Dunning letter, if you wanted to customize defaulting, anything like that, it's all configurable. All right. Next up, I'm going to move on to our royalty tracker system. So this is the bulk of the actual royalties piece of the puzzle. And the way that this is set up is actually very, very similar. So it all starts with projects. And then as James mentioned earlier, we'll then load in sales, review statements, and review reporting. So I'll just kind of walk through those couple sections and then show two additional tools that we have to help with some of those stages. So starting with projects, same sort of thing. We have a title. We may or may not have different imprints or business units that we can group those titles under. We'll have potentially payment thresholds. You would not pay them in this case unless they're above $50. Frequency of statements, the delay between a statement ending and a payment actually being sent to an author or licensor, and our first statement date that we can decide when our statement starts if it's a new contract. Inside of each project or title, we will have a list of products. So we can define all the different editions, all the different formats that are available for a particular title. Most of the time, working with books, the product ID will be an ISBN, but it sounds like in some cases that would actually be a SKU for you as well. It really doesn't matter what it is. It just needs to be some consistent identifier so we know what's being sold that's coming through the different sales channels to tell us where we allocate royalties to. There is also this list of formats available. This is a configurable list, so it's definitely missing a few that you would need, but we would make sure that during the implementation of Royalty Tracker, this list is customized. We have all the options available that you would need. We can also register in price, manufacturing costs, some inventory information. So if we need to use that for royalties or if that's helpful information, we can track that. Next step is to look at agreements. We're still under just this one project. So this one project anthology has 4 separate contracts, 4 separate agreements. These could be agents, they could be authors, they could be illustrators. It's someone that's receiving a royalty statement. For Arthur Smith, he has his own set of terms here. So if we wanted to, all 4 of these agreements could be totally separate terms. It's also possible to create a sort of template for the title and then copy and paste that to the different agreements and make sure that they're sharing the same terms. If we need to, we can even define a split percentage and say it's split 4 ways, so they're receiving 25% of the original royalty rate. This example doesn't make a lot of sense with the percentages, but you can imagine that's how that would work. We do have a lot of flexibility regarding the royalty rules. So if you need to calculate various rates depending on discounts, if there's exemptions depending on thresholds, for example, below the 500 verse count, we can make sure that that's captured in here and create some kind of alert or just prevent sales from calculating beyond that mark to prevent overcharges. Subrights would also be defined here. So if it's just we're loading in subrights, they would be coming over from our Metacomment rights system. And if we needed to, we could even define this further and say it's a particular type of subright. It's an audio subright, and we would be able to configure that in Metacomment rights to send over with the correct status. We also have these reserves against returns. These are the way that we hold reserves and just kind of protect you against future returns coming back. So we can define which revenue types or formats, sales channels that this applies to, what percentage we're holding back, and how long we hold it back for. This is just an optional rule that it can expire. So if the contract states it's only applicable for the first 2 years of printing, we would be able to set this rule up and just make sure it takes care of itself. Here is how we handle agents as far as sending out royalty statements. Rather than creating an agreement specific to the agent, the author has the agreement and then the agent is attached to it. We can choose if the agent has an extra rate on top of the author's royalty. and whether we want to send a statement to just the author, just the agent, or to both. Very last stage I'll talk about is adjustments. So we use this to apply any sort of deduction or change to a statement balance that's not from sales or royalties. Most of the time that's used for applying advances. So this is how we create advances. If the advances are partially recouped when we set up the system, we would need to know kind of what they're at currently. Otherwise, we can take in the original amount, load sales against it, and you'd be able to see that balance change over time as royalties come in, potentially returns come back, and it fluctuates up and down. Next step to talk about is sales. So all sales need to come into Royalty Tracker, and they will be processed here and actually calculate royalties. They get there in one of two different ways. The first way is direct import. So the file can just be selected, dropped in here. All that we require is that it's a CSV and it has the right headers so that we know what data is where in the file, and we can correctly map it into our system. The other more streamlined way of getting sales into our system is using Sales Aggregator, which is a sort of connected tool that we've created specific for this purpose of taking various sales channels. So in this case, we just have 7 kind of standard publishing channels that we see or distributors that we see, and we're able to create a template for each one and say the product ID is here, the date is here, or maybe it's not, we have to assign it. And it lets us do all these special configurations based on a fixed file format. And since that's fixed, it doesn't change month to month, we can reuse this template each time for the ACX files, all 7 of those that we created. And it just makes loading in sales very, very simple. This is the files once they've been processed. They're then able to be sent straight to Royalty Tracker. And we would see them here where they'll actually immediately, as soon as they are loaded into Royalty Tracker, they will start calculating royalties. There is no checkpoint or waiting for you to click a button or anything like that. Once they are in Royalty Tracker and calculated, we can view them using our sales reconciliation report. This is previewable, but just because of the size of it, I've opened it up in Excel. So, sorry, I just need to make sure that this is the report I want, which I can't see because Zoom's in the way. Okay, great. So yeah, this is our sales reconciliation report. We have 3 different levels of detail. This is the mid-tier level of detail. If you really need to, we'll record exactly what royalty term and the rules built into that term were used for calculations. But in general, we're going to tell you based on the product ID of something that was sold, which title or project we've assigned it to, who the royalty is going to be due for, based on our transaction date and net units, net amount here, maybe discount rate. We can then decide, here's some currency conversion information. That's another purpose of Sales Aggregator. So we can then, using all that information, the system will tell us it's actually registered these royalties, each line of sales to this statement period. It's used this royalty rate and it's applied this royalty amount. So there's an extreme level of detail in this report, and you can use it at any point to retrieve sales from the past. So it's very, very helpful for audits, just checking projections, anything like that. Next one I want to talk about is adjustments. It's a little easier because it's the same sort of style, but it's specific to just adjustments. So we'll tell you based on the project, who the adjustments apply to, what the adjustment's for, how much it's for, and the statement it's applied to. Last report to talk about, we have several others, but just for the sake of time, as you can tell, I'm rushing a little bit. I'm going to show this statement balances report, and that is just going to roll up these 2 reports into one and then detail all of the sub-statement balances to show us where that total number comes from. And that looks like this. So it's going to tell us who the statement's for. If you have different business units or imprints, we can see that in here. It'll tell us when the statement is for, which period it covers, some statuses. So has it been closed and finalized? Is it sent? Has it been paid? The title of the project in the statement. And then here we have all of our sub balances where we have prior balances that are unpaid, carried forward to the next period, total royalties, total adjustments, reserves released versus held, total project balance, and total statement balance. These are separated just in case there's situations where you have contracts combining multiple titles into one, and they're both recouping against the shared advance of some kind. That is possible, but rare, so that's something we can support if you needed it too. We will also show conversion. If you need to do foreign currency payments, we'll convert the statement amount. It'll show in their currency in the right amount. And then you can come in here and double check if you ever needed to see exactly what rate we used for that conversion. Last thing to talk about is statements, kind of the big final output as well as the payments. So that's all managed from the statements page here. Using these searches and filters, we can look at this list of statements down here. By default, it's open statements. So anything that's kind of still subject to change, we're adding in sales. We can come in here and, sorry, this is not the one I want to see. We can come in and actually preview the statement directly in the system. This is one of 12 different standard templates we have, so there almost certainly is something that will match kind of the fields that you need, but it's something we can configure and decide on during implementation. In general, we'll tell you the total per title. If an author has multiple titles, we'll tell you the revenue types or sales channels assigned. If there's subrights, we would put that in here as well. Total sales, total royalty rate. We can also show the granularity of just returns versus gross sales as well. This particular template just doesn't show it. Total royalties are summed, reserves held or released, any prior balances, any advances or adjustments applied, taxes potentially, and then we have our total statement balance. This would just be the next title in that set. Once we've reviewed the statements, either using the couple reports I showed, looking at them, downloading and reviewing them, we can then use these checkboxes, come over here and close these statements. So that's going to finalize these open statements and then it's going to lock them. So it's going to make sure any future changes we apply don't impact the calculations or the look of those closed statements. If you do need to apply changes, you can reopen, but it's just that extra step you have to take, so it's protected. You're not going to change something you've already sent out to an author and already paid. We'll let you download at any point, so you can always review statements, get the whole batch. It'll be a big zip file with however many PDFs. In this case, there's 702. And then we have sending. There's two different ways to send statements. The first is directly as an email attachment. I guess there's three ways. The first is mailing, physically mailing. Second is as an attachment directly on the email. So if you're able to actually email the statements, that is presumably a better way. But the best way to do it is using our royalty portal, where rather than getting the statement as an attachment that gets lost in their email, they would be granted their own account. And then anytime a new statement is available for them, they get a notification. They can then use that account to sign in and view their statements in our royalty portal. So this would be your view as the publisher. If you're Arthur Smith signing in, you're just going to see your own Arthur Smith statements. We'll include a link to download the statement PDF. And these can be disabled, but two optional buttons for the adjustment detail and sales details that make up this particular statement for this period. Couple other functions for Royalty Portal is document sharing and storage. If you want to share artwork, the actual contract itself with authors, you can do that here. If you just want to store it internally and keep track of it, associate it with a particular author, that's also doable as well. Similar sort of thing for messaging. This is a good way to send out messages, especially royalty publishing related. And we can either decide if authors get an email and get really notified about it, or if it's just something they see next time they sign in to Royalty Portal. Lastly, we know it's a pain to track down authors and just people in general and get updated contact details, so they're able to sign in, and optionally, if you wanted to, you could enable this, have them update their details here just to keep things accurate. This would also update Royalty Tracker, and we can just make sure that the two systems are aligned and it's correct. Very last thing I'll talk about is payments. So once that's all been done, statements are closed, statements are sent, financials have been checked, then you're actually ready to pay. Right now, this is configured with NetSuite. We have a direct integration. I push this button, it creates bills in NetSuite, and then it's just a really seamless integration. We also have a slightly less automatic, but still very seamless integration with several other payment processors, where it basically will generate a file based on the 702 that I've selected, whichever ones are payable. It'll tell me who's being paid, how much for which date, and then that can be loaded directly into 20 or so different systems that we've set up, and just make sure that the payments are processed and passed on through there. There is a lot more to talk about, but just for the sake of time, I don't think I'll be able to. So I think that's pretty much it, unless James has anything else to add as far as the demo portion here.
No, I think you did a good job. I know is this meant to be just pretty high level? So thank you, Aiden.
All right.
All right, I'm gonna recommand here. All right. So, um, how Metacom powers their royalty operations. So this is essentially what you just saw, but summarized into 6 capabilities. Rights tracking. Every right granted, retained, and sublicensed by title, format, territory, and term. Scripture permissions, built-in verse count tracking across all formats, and with alert thresholds tied to your license limits. The royalty calculation itself, the most important part. Net receipts, list price, tiered rates, escalators, subrights, everything automated, no more spreadsheets. And an author portal. So this is where what we just showed you is the real-time access to statements and sales data. Subrights reporting, where you can track agent commissions, foreign publisher receipts, license fee splits, and all done with compliance workflows. So with permission checklists, imprimatur gates, and post-publication monitoring, all integrated. Once again, Metacomet has been doing this for 26 years. We are purpose-built for publishing. And so here's my 10-point rights and royalty action plan for you to consider over the next while. This week, audit your top 20 titles for unexploited subrights, audio, translation, and curriculum, some of the easiest ones to look at. Pull your active contracts and see what you've sold in translation. This month, run a scripture permissions check. Every translation correctly licensed across all formats. Do you know if that's the case? And this month, verify your ICEL US CCB and LEV approvals on all liturgical and magisterial content. This quarter, think about your permissions workflow, from acquisition, editorial, pre-press to post-pub. And then start to standardize the riders, the scripture, liturgical, and doctrinal alignment riders that I talked about earlier. And then you can map a rights revenue plan. Which titles have the untapped audio, translation, and RCIA potential? And then ongoing, this is something that you can just consider each and every day, which is confirming the CCLI and one license compliance for any worship use streaming or recording. And in your next contract, require royalty statements that break out print, ebook, audio, parish bulk, and subrights. And lastly, make it a priority to evaluate purpose-built royalty management software. Once you have over 50 titles, manual tracking of your rights and your royalties gets incredibly complicated. It's very sophisticated, and it's incredibly time-consuming, and it really does expose yourself to a little bit of risk with operational human error, financial, and then ultimately reputational. So 7 things to remember as key takeaways. Rights are like a bundle of sticks. Everything can be sold separately, and every sale earns royalties. Scripture and liturgical permissions are legally required. You got to track the verse counts, format by format. ICEL, US CCB, and LEV permissions are non-negotiable for Catholic publishers. You have to bake this into your pre-press to make sure you've taken care of all of this. Subrights, audio, translation, film, curriculum. This is where the real margin lives. There are certain subrights that are much easier to sell than others, and translation really is probably number one, if not audio. Imprimatur and Nihil obstat are royalty milestones, not just editorial milestones. So you know, in the workflow, it really does make it is really important that you make sure you take care of this so you do not find yourself in a position where you've broken any gratis laws. Doctrinal alignment riders are fair when they are scoped to the work. They can't be scoped to the author. And they also protect everyone. They protect your author. They also protect the publisher. And so lastly, your royalty system must track rights, grants, license usage, and payments. Manually, this does break quickly, especially if you've gone over 50 titles, even smaller sometimes. So this is where I put it out to anybody here. If you have any questions, I know Teresa has recorded this. I think she's going to put this on the YouTube channel as well. But if you have any questions, feel free to fire away. We're listening.
I'm going to chime in at this point and just say, if anybody has a question or a comment, if you want to put it in chat or raise a hand, we can do that. We've got a couple minutes left. As you're doing that, I will just repeat kind of what James was saying, and that is that this will be located, a link will be at the USCCB website under programs and webinars. It will live there for a while, and it will live permanently on YouTube at the ACP channel, Association of Catholic Publishers. And you can find all of our webinars there as well. So, any questions, comments for James and Aidan? If not, then I am going to say thank you to our wonderful guests for this great presentation. James, I love your last two pieces, the 10 points and then the 7 takeaways. That was worth the 55 minutes of time. So I'm really glad you did it. There's nothing concrete that comes out of it. That is those 2 slides, 2 of the best, I think, for most of our folks. So that's it for today. Those of you who are attending the meeting, thank you for coming. It'll be good to see you. Representatives from Metacomet will be there, so make sure you touch base with them if you want to know more. And otherwise, we will see you hopefully the next time we have. Oh my goodness, somebody snuck that in really quick. Oh yes, the PowerPoint slides. Good question. Good question. James, will you have those? Could we have
Next
those
week?
so that we could share? Yeah, could we have those so
Yes.
we could share them? Excellent. We will do that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Susan, for bringing that up.
Yeah, I can send that to you, Teresa, and
Excellent.
I'll also have it with me next week. I'll be at a table, and I'm ready to talk.
Okay, great. On behalf of the ACP, thank you so much to Metacomet. Thank you so much to all of the rest of you for attending and for giving us your time. And we look forward to being with you soon in the future. That's
Yes,
it.
thank you very much. Travel safe, whoever's
You
coming to
bet.
Chicago.
Everybody. Goodbye, all.
All right, bye-bye.